cave. Welcome to the cave. We're in the cave talking about AI because we don't want anyone to hear us.
This is where everyone has to go once AI takes over. They'll all retreat to the cave.
And then we recreate the caveman drawings.
Right. You're gonna have to start everything all over again.
Mm-hmm. Well, humanness will probably be a commodity. Once people start integrating AI into their bodies, being like a pure human will be some sort of commodity. At least from a study level.
Like a pure blood or something.
Yeah, like the buffalo that you protect in the...
Or that's all Blade Runner, right? Where all of the animals are like the synthetic reproduction because there are no real ones left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a first sponsor.
This is AI yoga.
I'm doing yoga right now.
Well, people are falling in love with AI. I mean, they have these chat functions where people go on for sexual, right? But then because they've programmed the responses also to be human, they start getting nurtured. And then when I think they removed one of those AI things because of that. And then those people were heartbroken. They lost their lover.
That's crazy. It reminds me a little bit of there was like a psychological syndrome that people had after the first Avatar movie came out, where they really deeply wished they were one of the blue Na'vi people, and it was just very sad to them that they couldn't do the thing from the movie and hack in and be part of an indigenous culture like in the movie, and they people were depressed for a long time. But
well, they will be able to do that. What's happening to them in real life will probably be more like WALL-E, where they're just getting fatter, and
disabled on a satellite somewhere.
Muscle tone is gone. And
speaking of lack of muscle tone, no, that's not true at all. Well, I just want to welcome everybody to AI Affected, the podcast about algorithms, AI, and their effect on life, work, and human relationships. Very excited to introduce my guest today. He is a character actor on a legendary scale, has been in a bunch of well-known movies, including Coyote Ugly and Cable Guy and The Princess Diaries, and has worked with the top superstars in Hollywood, and also is one of the founders of modern improvisation, founded the Second City ETC companies, worked with Del Close and Paul Sills, the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Welcome, Jeff Michalski. Please. Hello.
I'm Jeff Michalski. I'm listening to your applause in my head.
Yeah, it's happening somewhere remotely. All the applause is remote. So thanks for being here. So I've had discussions on the show with a bunch of guys who are creative and authors, and they do various things, but everybody so far that I've spoken to does improv to some extent. And you are improv to some extent. It's like woven into the fiber of your being.
Yeah, it became my identity. My resume from early on has actor in it, but it starts with improviser. And at a time when everybody went, what?
I mean, that's still, especially in Los Angeles, that's still a thing where everyone's like, is that a thing?
Well, it's why I have been cast in films a lot, is that some film directors like to have as feature actors improvisers, and it's because of either it could be weaknesses in the script, but it also could be idiosyncrasies of the lead actors and their tendencies, and so if you're there and you're just responding to what's happening in real time, even if you are mouthing script stuff or inventing, what the scene needs, right? You know the script, so you know what the purpose of the scene is, but it gives a sort of a non-stop quality when you're filming.
Do they? So the directors in some of these projects, do they give you that kind of leeway explicitly? Do they go, well, almost, do your thing?
Almost all of them. Yeah. I mean, I have been on things where I've said a line slightly differently, and the script supervisor will be, stop. But eventually the director stops them. from intervening. And it's not like I'm creating a lot of things, really just trying to make the scene work. I'm not adding a lot of my own impetus to it.
Yeah, I've heard other famous improvisers talk about how in traditional acting, improv helps them with kind of the spaces in between the dialogue and how to fill those, and how that's kind of its own world that isn't always recognized, kind of thing.
Well, it's behavior. So the only thing you have to be aware of physically is where the camera is. So there are restrictions then on movement and how you can be spontaneous in that respect. So, but it's the connection. It's the stuff that I talk about in teaching. It's the engagement part that makes you valuable. Is that you already have that engagement going without any internal story. For instance, when you're a feature actor, if you sit in your trailer trying to make a character, the moment you walk on set, you're not having any rehearsal time, really, except with camera. So you're going to walk on set, and that's it. So you really have to play what's happening on the set in the moment with that person.
Because you might not even, I mean, I'm sure that you have access to the script if you want to read the context of everything, but really everyone's been doing this thing, and you come in to be part of this microcosm of the world that they've created.
Yeah, their character's locked in, right? So if suddenly have this thing that I'm trying to create that I put in my mind, and I'm going to play it this way, and I get on the set, and already the demeanor of the other player is different. I can't insert my creation into it. So it's about responding, really, and about responding in real time, connecting with the other actor.
Have you ever had any of these traditional actors come onto the improv stage and try out their thing?
All the time. Yeah, Tom Hanks played with us at Second City. I mean, we had, in our improv sets, we had guests, whoever was in town. So John Cleese came into town, and Terry Gilliam played, and the only guy I remember refusing to play, although I think he did go on stage, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So
I could see him kind of wanting his panoply of like preparers and script supervisors and
well,
stuff.
I don't know. He was doing a movie with Jim Belushi at the time, so he came into the thing, but I think he demurred, and I'm not criticizing it. It's like, you're in a bar, you're drinking, you're watching a show, and then somebody says, "Hey, you guy that you built your brand, come up on stage and destroy it." So.
I remember, I think it was like Catch a Rising Star, one of the old Robin Williams kind of debut specials. If you watch the extended footage of it, after he does stand-up, he sees his buddy John Ritter in the audience, and he's like, "Oh, let's do some improv."
I used to play with them. There's a thing here called D. Marcus had a place on La Brea, and Robin and John Ritter and all these other improvisers played in it. I did, too, when I came into town. And that's when I first started playing with him. But he also did Second City sets with us all the time.
So now I've heard other improvisers of that generation talk about playing with Robin specifically as, which you would imagine that he was kind of a whirlwind, and like you really had to keep up with him, and if you didn't, then he would just go.
Yeah, but if you're there, I love playing with him. We did some great stuff together. If he senses weakness or hesitancy, he'll just go.
He'll just leave you in the dust.
Yeah. So that never happened to me, but I saw it happen to people. But I don't think it was an ego thing. I think it was more of an anxiety thing.
Like he wants to take care of the show.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have time for you if
you're not with him, or if you're trying to do, just the typical things of conflict or withholding or whatever it is, or being paralyzed. He's going, well, there's an audience here.
Yeah, we got work to do.
And he'll take care of that. So, but he was actually, when I dealt with him in life, off stage, he was introvert and very, very quiet, almost like, So, you could say that if we're talking about AI, that you could use him as a model for AI. The ultimate joke machine wants someone that absorbs everything and then regurgitates it, all this information, on the spot.
That's true. That was kind of part of his bag, was just having this like huge breadth of, Shakespearean knowledge and knowledge of history and different cultures and different dialects, and that he could, throw them in there. That being said, I don't know that, well, again, AI is moving very quickly, so like who's to say? But it seems like Robin Williams specifically seems like the anti-AI, just because of how engaged he was and how he was right there. And AI wants context and facts, but doesn't really understand timing, especially.
Or hidden meaning, or nuance, or like when we talk about breaking open, deconstructing. Right? So that all those things are part of creativity. Is finding meaning in imagery, in symbol, in nuance, in tone. That becomes accessory to human communication. Is what your demeanor is. What are you communicating me with just by the way you walk into a room? All that type of stuff. So, and I think you also need a certain type of self-awareness to have that kind of empathy. That's the word that we want to talk, or chemistry, or consciousness, or whatever it is, that probably won't be generated by AI. I was talking to the producer earlier, and he had a measurement of consciousness levels of the new AI and why they had to turn it down. Right?
Oh, so you mean the gap between like large LLMs, large language models, and then AGI, which is the general intelligence that's considered to be kind of a sentient
But then we
consciousness.
asked what it means by consciousness, and then it started talking about measurements of. So it wasn't consciousness; it was just.
Well, this is kind of the puzzle of it, and this is what, co-sci majors and philosophers and neuroscientists are kind of trying to figure out right now. Like, if even in the large language models that exist right now, if there was some internal self-awareness, how would we know? Because it's designed to answer our questions. Do you know you're an AI? Yes, I know I'm an AI. But when will we know that there's something, that there's a spark in there, there's some level of self-awareness, and, how far will we push this technology before it becomes its own entity, or it's too late to recognize?
Well, I think more than likely is an augmentation where people bring AI into their biological systems somehow. That's probably be the first kind of a thing, but it might be something that's just heart regulation or something like that, some health thing.
Would you do that if, for instance, there was like, you could have all of the data that's available on your phone, but it would just be behind your eyelids, and so you could blink and have access to whatever you need and your phone numbers via some kind of, basic little implant or something? Would you do that?
I don't think for me, right now I don't even use GPS. For me, it's recognizing landmarks. Oh, I've been here before. Getting lost has been a very creative way for me to find my way around.
Yeah.
So again, it's that mistake thing. It's that idea of discovery that is part of human consciousness.
You just reminded me of something. I read a story years ago about enhanced sensory experience. So there were a couple experiences that people described where they are able to kind of take on not a psychic sense, but a extra sensory, like they're able to attain other senses. So for instance, a guy had a belt and he hooked up a bunch of cell phone vibrators on the belt, and it was connected to a map. And so whenever he was facing north, the vibrator on his belt that was north would vibrate. And so after doing this for 6 weeks, all of a sudden he had a map of his home city just imbued into his brain that he could see at all times, that it was just training him to know to orient himself.
I think I saw a YouTube video the other day with a guy that had some type of unit on his chest, and it vibrated, but I forget what it was training him to do, but it developed an extra sensory thing about a body thing. It might have been a heart thing or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I'd rather get lost.
I mean, I have a similar experience to you, which is that, especially when I'm learning a new city, and when I moved to LA, it was kind of before, Google Maps and things. You were still printing out MapQuest maps and that sort of thing. But yeah, I would intentionally get lost in neighborhoods just to kind of see what's around and orient myself. And as somebody who has, I've always been considered a smart kid to some extent going through school, but my sense of direction has always been the bottom of the populace. I'm always getting lost. I do not have a natural sense of direction. I had to live in Manhattan for months before I understood that if the numbers go up on the streets, you're going north, and then living in a grid helped me to orient myself a little bit.
Even though the grid numbers don't match in New York.
What do you mean?
Like if you go down to the next street, you might not, the numbers that might not match.
Oh yeah, well first of all, don't go to Soho because that's all out the window. Because
Yeah,
once
yeah.
you're south of Houston Street, it's all just this
Yeah.
First Street and First Avenue, and you're like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it is convenient. Geographically, New York is very convenient.
Yeah, and then to this day, like I hate San Vicente and Wilshire because they run diagonally. You know, they don't adhere to the grid, and so I can never figure out exactly where they're going.
Oh, there's a couple of New York streets like that, isn't it?
Yeah, Broadway.
Yeah.
Yeah, Broadway does that.
In Chicago, there's a bunch of them too. Indian trails, old Native American trails.
I like it. Yeah, Boston, where I went to school, is just all like roads designed for old cow paths from 300 years ago, and they just go in a circle to a dead end.
And in Ireland, they still have Roman roads that were built during Roman times. It's like, okay.
I got stuck on a road like that.
Yeah.
This was on my honeymoon. We were driving around from Blarney Castle to Killarney. We're going from Blarney to Killarney. And I was using Google Maps like an idiot, and Google Maps doesn't know what the good roads are in Ireland. So we ended up on this road that was supposedly a direct route, but it was just a one-lane, crumbling road, and I hit a pothole and got a flat tire. And we waited, a few hours for the guy to come. And he said, "What you doing on the butter road?" I'm like, "Oh, this is the butter road." And he's like, "It's a 300-yard butter road." And he's like, "Don't listen to Google. Google doesn't know anything."
That's right. It'll take you to the alley if you're a pizza delivery guy.
Yeah. Or my affluent equivalent, it'll make me make difficult left turns that I would never choose for myself, like, into major thoroughfares. I'm like, I didn't want to make this
No,
left.
I'm not going there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give AI a little lesson right now on how to do an Irish accent.
Okay.
Okay. So you do the largest mammal in the world, which is a whale, a 3-letter word for petroleum, which is oil, the meat of a cow, which is beef, and what happens when you catch a fish, you hooked, right? And then you just say those words: whale, oil, beef, hook. Whale, I, beef, hooked. Whale, I, beef, hooked. Whale, I, beef, hooked. Whale, I, beef, hooked. Whale, I, beef, hooked.
I was wondering how that was going.
I used to use it on stage. If I were doing an Irish character, I'd be saying that backstage.
Isn't there like a huge Irish populace in Chicago?
Yes. Yeah. Huge everything. If you think about it, it had, I don't know if it still does, but it had the largest Polish population in the world after Warsaw. It had the largest Irish population, maybe Boston might be more, but and German too. So it was the whoever the immigrants of the time that were being brought in for labor or whatever.
Right.
Basically, the history of Chicago is battles between ethnic groups. Like the Poles were brought in because the Germans were starting to unionize. The Poles were brought in to break up the unions because they bring them over on boats and they work for less.
And this was kind of the subsequent waves of immigration from different parts of Western and then Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I would say now it would be Hispanic in Chicago, and where they're disruptive of the labor market, and not but so the people that are there, existing there already, have animosity toward it because they see that as a sort of conscious thing of somebody undermining them. It's like, no, it's your capitalist masters that are doing that.
Right. But that's also a pattern that has repeated itself for a century and a half.
Yeah.
Thing like that. Yeah. I find it interesting. This is very off topic, but just the notion of like what we went through in the early 19th century of discrimination against Germans, discrimination against Poles, discrimination against Italians, and they were all considered not white back then. And then at some point, I think around the time of the rise of white supremacy, they needed to kind of coalesce all of these groups that used to hate each other, that were discriminating against each other. It would be like, a store would say no dogs or Irish or something like that. And now that's all kind of whitewashed, to pardon the pun, but like it's all, kind of thrown together into one group.
Yeah, and I don't know. So off topic also as well, when you start digging into these cultural issues, at the core you're always going to find it's racism's at the core. Some of the things that people talk about as American values and stuff like that. When you just start pulling it away, like the education stuff, everything else, it just eventually gets down to that. And then we're in this situation, not just here, but in Europe, where we're suddenly being ruled by minorities. So if you look at any poll about particular issues, the majority is generally on the side of the more progressive thing, but politically and what actually occurs never reflects that.
So what do you mean specifically to Poland in regards to being ruled by minorities? Are you talking about like the conquering,
Well, whoever's
Russians or whoever's in Poland in a given time?
Well, Poland, for instance, was a republic previously, like in its first kind of governmental thing. So it wasn't a ethnic state. So you had people who were fleeing basically some type of repression all over the world, whether it's they're running from the Holy Roman Empire or from religious persecution, let's say in Scotland. Like the Unitarian Church basically moved into the area of Poland and developed there, and so there tends to be a larger than normal ethnic Scottish population there, Jewish population until the horribleness of World War II. Everybody, really. So that's where you ran away to.
Oh, interesting.
Because they weren't part of the Holy Roman Empire. They called themselves Catholic, and that was to protect themselves from the Holy Roman Empire, but they weren't part of it, so they weren't subject to some of the things.
So, you've been there recently because you've been touring with your duo group, We Polak, and doing a lot of stuff overseas. I wanted to ask you about this because something that we talk about kind of frequently on this show is mind share, how social media and memes kind of affects discussions and kind of makes them all homogenous and we're all talking about the same things. Yeah. How does that vary in a place like Poland versus the US?
Well, I would just say on a cultural level, they are still consumed by what happened to them in World War II and then under Russian occupation. So their experience is just different. Right now, if you look at Ukraine and you see the devastation in these cities where they're just nothing, well, that's what happened to Warsaw. Right? So it was basically, I think there were a couple thousand people left in Warsaw. Wow. At the end, after the Germans left, and it not only had to be rebuilt, it had to be repopulated because everybody else was annihilated or forced out during the Warsaw uprising, not the ghetto uprising, but the one that followed it. 200,000 people were killed in a matter of 2 months. Right? Maybe it's more than that. So it was just that consciousness still exists there. You see in especially older Poles, you see this kind of stamped look of horror and bewilderment. And I think it also connects to really people from outside. They're all possibly threats.
So other than, obviously the specter of the Russian invasion looms larger in Poland, which
right
is
next door.
Yeah, it's right next door. It had been considered, just in the way that Ukraine is considered a buffer zone by the Russians, they probably think of Poland in the same exact way.
Absolutely.
Whereas here, while there are certainly many people in support of it, a lot of people are like, well, why are we spending all this money when we have problems at home, and et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of like the younger populace, is everybody consumed with like memes and social media over there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, they're basically pretty much, if not Americanized, Westernized. A lot of young people speak English. They're in improvisation. They're American. They like American movies better than they like Polish movies and things of that. They have constraints over them that we've broken. Like Catholicism still reigns politically there, and so. I mean, you can just to slide back into AI. We were just talking about this maybe before a little bit. That the fact that I was raised in a Catholic environment, in a Catholic, sorry about the mic there.
No worries.
Does that mean that I've been altered by some sort of artificial intelligence and being programmed in that way?
I mean, think that's really interesting. And I don't even know exactly how to approach this topic, but it is sort of, there is sort of an information battle going on right now between various types of programming and deprogramming, and people who are programmed a certain way, noticing that a lot of the popular memes and trends are into deconstruction and deprogramming, a lot of which seems to come from the like Derrida and like Michel Foucault, like French mid-century school of like nothing has meaning. So even within like the popular, you know, non-religious, secular is the word I was looking for. In the secular circles, it's like, well, the traditional family, you know, unit doesn't really mean anything. Gender doesn't really mean anything. We can kind of define everything. And so whenever that happens, that's kind of like destabilizing. And then so then these kind of battles kind of erupt over whose memes are going to define human existence going forward. And I feel like that's kind of the time that we're in right now.
Yeah, but this is what I like about improvisation. It's the engagement part. Like, context changes consistently on stage all the time, right? So it's not about the context, it's not about the content, it's about the engagement. And even in something that sounds kind of bleak, the philosophies, I don't know their work, but it sounds kind of bleak. It may be liberating, but bleak at the same time. If you don't have that notion of creative engagement in whatever reality you are creating.
I feel like, and I mean, I'm sure you would agree with this, that improv is like, for some reason, it's very anti-authoritarian in its nature.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because...
I mean, is it because it's not part of the traditional capitalist system and people don't do it to make money, they do it for the art form, and I guess art is kind of subversive generally,
No,
but...
it's built in originally with Viola even. So people that she was dealing with, which were basically immigrants in Chicago neighborhoods that didn't speak the same language, it was about engagement and connection. All those people had experiences of being trapped by authoritarianism in some respect or another. So even American labor markets were, they were being shot by police that were, they're public servants that were now being used to kill what they called the agitators and anarchists. And
is this like late 60s kind of?
No, that would be like in the early 1900s.
Oh, the anarchists who were like undermining support for World War I and all of that stuff.
That's right. And they're immigrants, and they're labeled as immigrants and a danger as such. So I think, so Viola comes up later on in the 50s and 60s, right? And her thing is about having these various groups engage and having the freedom to discover and express themselves. Some of her writings at Northwestern University have to do with the interactions between lobes when you're improvising and what's happening in there.
So they've actually like hooked up improvisers to like EEGs and they're trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, they have now, with the same way that they did with monks, right? Same places are popped open, right? But Viola's wasn't off a science. That was her speculation, her theory, that's what was going to be found out.
Was what, that you're activating a totally different portion of the brain once you're in it and visualizing your surroundings in a scene, and
it's not just that, it's this here. There's a thing that happens when people make eye contact, where there's a actual you can spark something in here. Something will be activated in here and vice versa. So it's
I guess that's the core of the read, which is a primary mechanism that you teach.
Yeah, well, because it's that thing that puts you together in the same space with that person, and it shows that you're not inside, you're outside.
Yeah,
and it makes it safe for the other person to be recognized. That's all.
Is that? I mean, part of the reason that I feel like improv will be one of the last bastions mastered by an AI is, I mean, it's in part because it's missing the eye contact aspect of reading people,
Right.
but I think also because the programmers of the AI stereotypically might be more of like the spectrum-based people who don't relate with other people as well, and so they're very good at coding the language, but
Yeah.
they don't understand all of these subtle signals and things.
Yeah, and the YouTube things right now, when you're looking at AI, they're basically talking about what's going to happen to the economy, right? And if that focus on AI still has to do with probably a system that won't exist when AI becomes predominant, for instance, if there's no labor market, where's capitalism, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even in theory, right?
Yeah.
So these things that we're projecting into the future as big problems with AI, or having to what's being programmed into AI is stuff that maybe protects that as opposed to what it can do for humanity. Right? So those are the first guys in. They're dealing with the Elon Musks and such, and he's worried about disruption too. For his control.
It's true. I mean, if you're following the space, all of this with ChatGPT is unfolded in less than 2 months or something like that. But, most of the momentum behind it is people trying to build a business and having 100 different AI chatbots as their assistants. And now with the rise of AutoGPT, this kind of infinitely generated assistants giving prompts to themselves and working on their own. But only for the purpose of selling a product on Google Shopping or something like that.
And that's not. And then we were talking about creativity earlier. It's not creative. I mean, just having access to information is not creative.
That's a profound note. I'm going to read a note from our sponsor while we think about
yes.
the nature of creativity and perhaps unlocking our own creativity. Discover a new path to inner peace with Shirley's spiritual yoga meditation healer. Chakras, balancing, energy, cleansing, and more. Call 424-542-9070 now for a free consultation and start your transformation today. All forms of payment are accepted. It's weird that this is, ostensibly a show about AI and its effect on people. And almost every single episode, we've delved into the occult for whatever reason. So we had one guest who was talking about aliens using AI avatars to visit the Earth. And we had, another one talking about psychic experiences and shared dreams. And, I didn't prompt any of this stuff. This is just kind of what comes out.
When you said that, I just pictured a really overweight alien sitting in a big chair, visiting Earth virtually through their perfect avatar.
Yeah, they're just playing video games just like everybody else.
Yeah,
I guess.
So, George was talking about, the producer was talking about AI as a potential alien form. He didn't say it is an alien thing, and I suppose I don't know. My whole thing with the whole idea of advanced alien civilizations is, why would they be interested in taking over anything? That if they're that advanced, they have to be beyond the scope of having slaves. They could have their own AI.
Because
right?
we just invented a whole new form of slavery in the form of this AutoGPT stuff.
That's right.
And so they have, probably way more advanced forms of that.
Now that's interesting. Now the AI is slave, right? And we're into the capitalist structure of legal slavery.
Oh yeah, I mean, as a sci-fi person, since I was a kid, I fully anticipate, and now I thought this would, and it may still come in the form of clones, and how do we, attribute human rights to people who are clones, or, who may have been grown in a lab as vessels for spare parts for sick people, because that's another form of cloning. At what point is there going to be a civil rights movement? Will AI need its own civil rights movement to...
Oh, there'll be lawyers.
Yeah. The lawyers will want the work for sure.
And the lawyers will be using AI to get all the precedent and every possibility of how to present the perfect case for it.
So I guess we already covered this ground a little bit, but like, so we know that ChatGPT is sufficiently advanced that it can pass a bar exam, it can pass a medical licensing exam, it can, you know,
Can it jump over a pole?
yeah. What kind of poll?
Does it? Does it replace the Olympics or athleticism? Or
Yeah, I mean, if you look at those Boston Dynamics robots that are now like doing the dog robots that are doing like fluid dances and leaping over it's like, yeah, just put a GPT brain inside of one of those and
well,
give
we
it some
are
commands.
already, in a sense, chemically, we've been altering our physicality for sports. Right? So with steroids and new ones that we don't even know what they do yet. So how much of that do we consider artificial as far as that we're competing beyond human capabilities by enhancing ourselves?
Yeah, I feel like you can only create arbitrary lines around that stuff. Because like right now, I'm drinking caffeine because I know that it's a nootropic and it's enhancing like my ability to process information and probably, you know, making the conversation a little bit more fluid. And is that
And giving you great anxiety.
yeah, a little bit. But there's no podcast, you know, governing body that's going to tell me that that's not allowed. So
Yeah. So, I don't know. We're also talking before George mentioned that creating a me right now, right? The AI version of me that will go off and have its own experiences and things like that as a possibility.
So wait, to what purpose other than training an AI? Is that for your purpose to create?
Oh, I don't know what the purpose is. That's in George's mind somewhere. But yeah, I don't know if we'd be even attached. And that's the other thing I was thinking about is that again that thing of what is consciousness. Right? So is consciousness access to information, or is there like when you fall in love with somebody, there's an energy transference, or if you watch a live performance, there's an energy transference.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to AI generated music, and you know, I guess it sounds okay, but it doesn't move me. And I don't know if it's because of some bias I have, or that. Like I saw a show last night, and it's really the connection between that living entity's performance. To me, there's an energy exchange, or my experience as a performer. To when you get that feedback from the house, you suddenly have more physical abilities. It's like
Right.
watching Bruce Springsteen perform, where suddenly he's jumping on speakers and everything, or an athlete when the big crowd is there making that unbelievable catch that they never did before. There's something about everybody's concentrated energy on an individual that to me seems to propel them and enhance them as well.
I was given. I always love telling this story because people think that I'm being like a jerk for telling this story. I was once given an out of print book by a clown called The Death and Resurrection Show, and basically what the book does, you can't get it for less than like $300 if you order an original copy. It draws a direct line between ancient shamanism and the modern entertainer.
Yeah.
And so it's like the reason that people will bring their sick child to a rock concert and ask the lead singer to heal their sick child, it's not total nonsense. No. Like, it's based on a very old tradition of the shaman having a few different roles at once. Like, they were the healer, they were the entertainer, and then they were also there to prophesize. Those were the three main roles of the shaman.
Yeah, but I don't think that power exists in isolation. I think it's connected to all this attention on the avatar or shaman itself that even lends itself to having access to outside energy that comes through you. And where does it come from? It comes from other sentient entities. It's like or Gaia or plants growing. Any of that thing has a connection that we talk about as spirituality, but it might also be a energy field that is what we would call consciousness.
So that, I mean, you really are drawing a bright line between living beings and like this kind of synthetic being. Is that like, can it even potentially participate in the Gaia experience?
Yeah, it's like we were talking about sex, AI sex workers, for instance. How is it beneficial for them? what's their and maybe it's okay for the lone masturbator or whatever mental connection that you make from watching porn or whatever it is, but is there an energy exchange that happens like when you do fall in love, or you do have these experience of a oneness with another character? I mean, maybe it's experienced by the organic sentient human being, but will the same thing be experienced or anything like it being paid attention to? Are we gonna create an AI narcissist or whatever? I don't know.
I was going to say, I think we may need the assistance of our Shirley's spiritual yoga meditation healer to draw the connection between this entity and whatever energy field. And again, like, given the creation of this stuff by like cold, potentially Asperger spectrum coders who, could not, my assumption is, could not be less interested in what we're talking about.
Yeah, right now it's money and war, right? That's what we're building AI and entertainment. So, on this AI thing, someone was talking about the most advanced things technologically right now are porn and the finance industry using AI that have had the most successful use of it. That's very interesting.
It may be egocentric of me because I love improv so much to feel like it has some important role to play in this whole thing that we're talking about, because it seems like, we describe improv as human training sometimes, like how to help people to be more human, how to help them to connect with another human being in a world that is constantly dehumanizing everyone because of what we're talking about.
You definitely have agency. I mean, when you talk about that word agency, which in every identity movement, right, which we're proliferating with right now, in the bottom end of it has to do with agency. So even if the categories of identity become so extremely limited, not to get controversial, but even into the thing of individual pronouns and stuff like that, which is a on the positive end, it's a remedy, but on an extended end is like, at what point do I want to be identified in a singular basis? And that removes so this thing that creates agency also removes agency at the same time.
Can you expand on that idea of being identified on an extended basis?
That I want to feel that I'm still becoming, and if I start calling an identity of white, male, creative, whatever the thing is, I've really, in a sense, removed the impetus to become, whatever.
Yeah, because the labels that you've given yourself have a connotation and they have a history tied to it. That's and right. it kind of constrains how you can behave.
Or even how you're identified. For instance, sometimes when I've been on stage, I've been treated as the old guy. Right? No matter what the concept of the emerging improvisation is, right? And I've witnessed it at Second City, for instance, when we had black actors in our cast, that it didn't matter what they did; they were always identified as black.
Right.
So there'd be a domestic scene where it's like you're out there playing brothers. And then one of the actors would feel compelled to go, yeah, but we have different fathers, or this kind of stuff, and it always bothered me intensely. That, and also the way female roles were limited and dismissed in them. Trying to think of what the point I was trying to make.
Well, yeah, you were talking about the limits of these labels. And
and they're actually used to cut off or dismiss, right? And still, to this day, so even things like ageism or this or the old white guy or whatever it is, even though there might be a remedy and a justice to it, at the same time, you're doing the same thing.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go on a rant, but, I grew up in a different era, the 90s or the 80s if I was a child, and everything from kindergarten on was about, however unrealistic this was about trying to achieve like a race blindness and treating people as people. And it just always seemed to me that was like clearly, even if it was imperfect and we, you know, we still have to, obviously we have to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, but I would think that what we would want to strive for would be race blindness, where we're just, you know, doing the Martin Luther King thing of assessing people and the content of their character. But that seems to be
not even judging that deep, right? In the sense that just that person, if there is a thing such as a shared consciousness, then, like in Buddhism, then I am you, you know? And we are all together. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah. Is it possible that like super woke people have just not done enough psychedelics to like be in touch with their oneness with everything?
I don't know if I think Leary said that psychedelics were no longer necessary because it had been absorbed by media. That things that were out-of-body experiences were now being regenerated as through certain commercials and other things, so that you can have that experience without the use of psychedelics.
Wait, despite the fact that I'm inhaling iced tea, I need
like
you to...
Pee-wee. Yeah. Pee-wee Herman, did you ever see the Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Yeah, of course.
That's a psychedelic experience.
Extremely, for a kid's show, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, so is Ren and Stimpy, and so is a lot of... I mean, look, if you're going to be an adult making, like, really engaging children's programming, maybe outside of Mr. Rogers, you probably have...
Gumby and Pokey.
Yeah.
That guy was definitely an acid head. I mean, he admittedly so, right?
No doubt. I mean, it's probably just adults trying to reimagine their vivid childhood imagination that they... Well, their pineal gland is hardened and they can't do it anymore.
Doing acid was a liberating thing for me at 16. And I've heard Phil Jackson say that, too, the Bulls guy. And it was because whatever was the narrative, and we're talking about a 50s narrative, really, that the 60s are breaking out, but that's a minority of people that are doing it. What we call the hippie movement or whatever else there was a tiny bunch of people. Everybody else was still in the lockstep of American militarism, industrial complex, some weird form of patriotism, otherism, racism. All those things were our culture.
Right.
And so something like that was the breakthrough of, oh no, there's something else out here. And whether it's hallucinatory or whatever that experience is, it's different, and it breaks the pattern, and it changed me. Right? So just in expressing what you were experiencing was a change. So I don't know if AI can have that moment of self-realization through psychedelics.
Well, while we try to figure out how to feed psilocybin into AutoGPT, I'm going to do another quick spot here. So in addition to the Meditation Center, we're also sponsored by Sharby Token. To learn more about this exciting cryptocurrency, head over to coinmarketcap.com/currencies/Sharby. That's SHARBI. As you know, our vaunted producer has 300 million Sharby tokens, so he's invested in it. You should check it out. It's, could be the next Shiba Inu.
I think just by definition, Bitcoin or that type of currency is exciting.
I'm excited by it.
I mean, just because you don't know.
It's talking about anti-authoritarian things. Like, if you really get into these, if if you marry these different worlds of like, we've done the psychedelics, and then we think about all these structures of control, and then you start learning about the Federal Reserve and how they manipulate currency and destroy, and like via the World Bank, destroy other countries.
Even in that there is no such thing at the point that we've digitalized. I mean, nobody's going to walk up with a truck and have their wealth in it. I mean, no matter how rich there's not enough bills to do that.
No, that's right. Only about I think about 10% of the money that we use, dollars, are physical dollars, and the rest is virtual.
So if you extend that as a trend for everything, It means that we're moving into a non-tactile, digital, and maybe eventually totally non-material existence.
It is. And Bitcoin itself was born out of pretty much the 2008 real estate crash, financial larger crash. And I remember like there were quotes from Neil Kashkari, who was at the Federal Reserve, saying, well, we're going to backstop these banks because we literally have an infinite amount of money that we can turn on at the Federal Reserve. And he thought that was a confidence-inspiring statement. And everyone said, you have what? So it's all meaningless then.
That's right. Yeah. So accumulating something that's meaningless is meaningless.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, to me, I've heard the best use for cryptocurrencies is in to flow, to move it, to get rid of it, as opposed to keep it, because what are you keeping it? And where are you keeping it? You're keeping it nowhere. It's nothing, and you're keeping it nowhere.
It's true. One thing that I've also learned as a counter to all of the crypto craze is because I've worked for a number of exchanges, like not Coinbase, but things like Coinbase. And so Bitcoin is kind of slow and janky, the blockchain, such that it could not process like a Visa card amount of transactions every year. So you have all these centralized exchanges build what are called lightning networks on top of the blockchain. But every institution like Coinbase and BitGo, like they own their own lightning network. And so all of the transactions within that network are owned by that centralized entity. So now you have a system where you have all of these centralized entities with their own little pet lightning networks that they own all of the transactions within, that only occasionally interact with the original Bitcoin blockchain. And you have the same problem again, which is a bunch of large centralized banks controlling the flow. And as we've learned, if a centralized exchange holds your Bitcoin and they go under, you ain't getting your Bitcoin back.
Now we're back to pulling the plug, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's people that speculate on electronic body, about...
what is that?
It's like the idea that we're under, like, for instance, just because we're underneath satellite, that we have an electronic body that we're not...
Are you talking about like electromagnetic fields and all that kind of stuff?
And that we do have an electronic body as well as whatever organic, or maybe it's part of it or a system of it. So in that sense, we may already be AI.
Or at the very least, carrying a 5G phone with us at all times is somehow interfering with our natural, biorhythms and magnetic
Or developments. For instance, in McLuhan's world, Marshall McLuhan, is that every technology that's created is an extension of a human capability. So wheels as legs, and that is sort of a psychic thing. The fact that I can get on Messenger and communicate with somebody in China now, right? That's psychic powers. Right?
So I think,
but maybe we dull those or don't allow them to develop because we're replacing them with technologies.
I think McLuhan, I forget the phrase that he coined, but it was something to the effect of via social media, which he predicted some form of it, is obviously before his time. But he said that once social media exists and this kind of planetary communication network exists, it kind of homogenizes the human personality because we all become like machine man, and we're all sharing
we're part of the
thoughts.
Android meme. That's what he called it, even the Android meme. Right? So so when people talk, when they say, well, maybe we're in a matrix, or that this idea of AI, we might already be some version of that.
Sure. Are you talking about that we might be in a simulation, or we ourselves might be iterations of some previous human existence?
I mean, and replications. People talk about reincarnation. It's like, well, what was the population of the planet when I reincarnated from Ugg to
Yeah, at some point you need to just start making copies because too many vessels. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you being here, Jeff. For anybody who's, I'll give you a chance to promote stuff, but since I take the class, I'm going to promote the class. Every Saturday in Culver City at the Fanatic Salon, Jeff teaches a terrific drop-in for all improv levels. and all human training levels. So if you're interested in that, please check out fanaticsalon.com. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to plug.
No, I'm just busy doing stuff in Europe as well now, because I don't know why, because they just have a need.
Yeah, and so you show up.
So I show up, and so yeah, I have nothing else to promote really. So just workshops and shows. I work with a duo.
Right here, right?
The Fanatic Salon is in Culver City.
Yep. Yeah, George has got it up on the screen there.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that's it.
So, but I'm available for anybody that wants to engage with me. That's what make myself available for that.
Well, cool. This has been AI Affected, a podcast where we occasionally talk about AI and other times about the Gaia consciousness. So thanks, everybody, for
And what if
stopping
that's AI?
in. Oh, man, don't depress me. So usually George just has us like talk our way out even after the goodbye.
Oh, like now?
Yeah, like now is where on a traditional talk show you would fade out the volume and just watch the talk.
I think George needs to be a guest.
Yeah, I mean George is like a filmmaker. I'm interested in his background. He does a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, we were talking about AI pitches a little bit ago. Mm-hmm. Having the AI tell you how to integrate with whatever studio you're interviewing with.
Oh, that's interesting. Like an interview prep. Kind of.
Well, he's saying that there's a culture behind that entity, and if you know what their cultural biases or needs are, then the AI probably can give you the pitch that or the areas to. Am I correct, George? Am I speaking for you?
Yes.
That the AI can match that up for you.
Speaking of which, have you seen any of the AI art generation tools like Midjourney and that kind of stuff?
Well, I've seen the results of them.
So these are also just prompt based, but you can do like, you can give it a setting and then you can say like a Stanley Kubrick movie and it'll provide the lighting and the setting and make it look like something from The Shining.
It'll make it look like it.
Yeah, via all of the art that it's stolen from all of its inspirations of the human artists.
Yeah.
And
So try to
aggregated.
Now they have these movements where they're returning physical art structures back to the countries where they were generated or regions they were generated. How do you even deal with that?
I don't know. I get stuck in the giving like indigenous art back to people from museums. I don't know how you give like AI inspirations.
Well, you give them to their thing. Yeah, but AI, it's like that's so again. That's something that breaks the what we call property.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of ironic that in the Rust Belt, the post Rust Belt era, like all of the old automotive workers who were displaced by robotics. Then you had all the Silicon Valley people being like, well, just learn to code, And now all the coders are going to be replaced by the AI ChatGPT, which can code for you and. And like, what's left? Improv.
McDonald's.
Yeah. McDonald's and improv, and that's it. And nothing else. Are we good? Okay. I got hot under these headphones.